But the fact that we're sort of limiting our collaboration with this incredible intelligence that in many, many ways is, a tiny fraction of our intelligence, and in many, many ways is a huge multiplier in our intelligence. And that we're using this sort of chat interface to do it is like, talking with paper cups with the string between them to try to talk to someone, right? You're just losing all this information. You're making it this slow and painful thing to do.
Thank you for listening to the Ask AI podcast. To get our latest episodes, AI news, discount codes for events, and links to free resources, sign up to our monthly newsletter by visiting askai.org and clicking the subscribe link. That's askai.org. Today's guest is Daniel Wigdor, one of Canada's leading voices in human-computer interaction and applied AI. He's a University of Toronto computer science professor, an entrepreneur, an investor, and a researcher whose work has shaped how people interact with technology around the world. His amazing career has also included time at Meta, where he was the director of research science. Daniel is currently the co-founder and CEO of AXL, a Toronto-based venture studio building the next generation of human-centric AI-powered companies. Welcome, Daniel. It's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Chris. Thank you.
You and I actually had a reverse interaction in some ways. So many people in the world today meet online as their first touch point. And you and I actually met in person at the SAS North conference, and we had a great chat there. And so it's really great to continue discussion we had there in a slightly longer format, because you've got so many interesting points of view to share.
Well, it's great to have the opportunity. Thank you.
So you've had a really interesting career. You've pivoted between academia and industry and the venture space now where you're working. And I'm just really interested on how you got started in artificial intelligence. What was your inspirational moment? Where did it all begin?
Certainly. So I've been working in applied technologies and applied AI for a couple of decades now. Fundamentally, the value that I bring to all of it is, how can this technology benefit the particular person using it, but then also more broadly? And that lens I've applied to several different technologies over my career. The very first one actually led to a deep traumatizing moment that has led me now to work on AI more directly. So if you think back to January 9th of 2007, Steve Jobs got on stage and said, "We have invented a revolutionary technology called multi-touch. And thanks to multi-touch, we are going to be able to take over the smartphone market." Now, multi-touch now is just sort of, the basis of how all technology really works in the mobile space. But back then, this idea that instead of having the bottom of your phone taken up by a keyboard or other physical controls, instead you could have a full glass front to the entirety of your phone and actually touch the screen itself and have a great interaction experience. That was a pretty new idea in the mobile space. The problem was that I found this deeply traumatizing for three reasons. First, he was right. It was a revolutionary technology. But of course, in that instance, the king or queen being dragged in public square and beheaded was research in motion, right? BlackBerry, great Canadian tech darling from down the road in Waterloo. The second reason I found it traumatizing was that I found myself listening to Steve Jobs announce that Apple had invented multi-touch on a multi-touch device I built for my PhD thesis at U of T. And to be clear, I didn't invent multi-touch either. The first multi-touch input to a computer was done at the University of Toronto in 1982. But the third most traumatizing thing about all of this really is Apple didn't do anything wrong, right? U of T didn't patent this stuff. And if they had, the patents would have all expired, right? So frustrating was watching the Canadian people spending millions and millions and millions of dollars developing this technology over decades, right through my PhD thesis. 25 years later, this work was still ongoing at U of T. And then Steve Jobs claiming ownership of it and using it to destroy one of our tech companies. So I watched all that happen. Finished my PhD. I then went off and I became the architect of the Microsoft Surface devices. And back then it was a big multi-touch table. Some of your listeners may remember my version of the Surface. And now, of course, it's tablets and laptops and things. And all of that technology that we built became the basis of the multi-touch stack across all multi-touch devices now. Anything with a web browser in it, iOS, Android, et cetera, et cetera. And now, of course, we're engaging deeply to attack this problem for AI.
Yeah, it's almost like the digital equivalent of the old saying about Canada, the hewers of wood and the drawers of water. And we don't add enough value to our own inventions and things. So That's a very inspirational moment. I mean, just watching that unfold must have been, well, obviously it created the inspiration to keep moving in the space and move more towards ownership of innovation. So today
That's
you're
right.
working at Axel, and Axel describes itself as a venture studio. Now, a venture studio might not be a term that everyone is familiar with. Could you describe what a venture studio does?
I think the best way to explain it is to contrast it with things that people may be more familiar with, right? So if you've heard of an incubator or an accelerator or a venture fund, all of those types of things have one thing in common, which is they have what they would call deal flow, but incoming companies that exist already, that have a business that they're trying to build, and they provide cash, resources, et cetera, to make it better. In contrast, we create the companies ourselves. So we're not looking for people who have a company concept already that they're bringing to us. We create those concepts. And instead, what we're looking to do is to create great companies based on the technologies and concepts that we develop with founders that we bring in to shepherd them out. We find that the venture studio approach is essential in this space for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that where we're at with AI, I compare to the sort of smartphones of 2006. Everyone is looking, they're seeing these really impressive demos and saying, oh, hey, look, I can have a chat bot. It seems to be intelligent, right? And everyone's looking around and saying, okay, so I want to make money on this thing. So where do I invest? Well, the technology that's been developed so far is all the infrastructure. So there's money pouring into the equivalent of the cellular providers, right? That's how I think of, OpenAI or Anthropic, right? They're just building the platforms that everything's going to get built on.
Right.
And so the concepts that we're hearing from people who have not been working with AI for a couple of decades are all very much in the like, oh, I understand AI to be a chatbot, so I'm the better chatbot. Whereas we can understand that chat is just one manifestation of AI. And instead, what we focus on is what is the business problem that you want to tackle first, and then we apply the technology. And we have a deep corporate partnership program where we can co-develop with some of Canada's greatest companies, startup concepts. Before we even attach a founder to one of our companies, we have a first customer already in place. We have a validation of the market beyond that first customer, and we have effectively a strategic investor. And all of that is done before the founder gets attached to the company. And so we find that that helps us to overcome a lot of the problems people see in Canada, getting their first customer and getting momentum and all of that. All that's done before the founder starts.
Well, that really flips the script on how things work. And I'm quoting that from your website. So it truly is different approach. If your team is bringing in a founder, what does their role look like from that point?
It can sort of depend. Ultimately, we believe that by having the studio in place, we have the team that can build the technology. We have marketing partnerships, accounting partnerships, legal partnerships, so we can actually, get the company structured and get the go-to-market going. We have our own sales team internally that can start to sell the product. And so, just as a quick example, we have a startup right now that has thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash in the bank, and we don't have a founder for it yet. But we're still just motoring along and building it. But certainly it has happened that we think we've got a great concept, that we've got a first validation, we've got a first customer, and then we bring in a really passionate founder. We don't need techie founders, because we're playing in the space above the platform. So, I don't need someone who has any competence in AI at all, really. I need competence in is deeply understanding customers and their needs. So it's really about marketing and sales. Certainly, once the right person goes in and starts really talking to customers, that there's a hard pivot of the company, and we're fine with that, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all just trying to solve problems for customers.
Is it fair to say that the core concept behind this approach is really a de-risking exercise? Like, did you note that a lot of where startups or innovation stumbles in the early days is not having some of these ducks lined up?
It's a combination of factors. Certainly, that is a big one. Absolutely. It's de-risking in a few dimensions. So we have our own venture fund. We've raised $15 million, which was our target. In fact, we were planning to only raise $5 million a year, but we raised all 15 in the first go. But we're investing pre-founding. Right? I don't know if we coined that term or not, but so it's super, super early. So we definitely need to de-risk in the sense of being able to make smart decisions as early as possible in the process. But that's true of every venture fund or operation. But for us, it's really about, we have a group of people and talent in Canada that I think people don't really understand exists. So Canada leads the world in two areas of computer science. One is AI. And my colleague, whose office is upstairs, having won the Nobel Prize, Jeff Hinton, I think really brought to the public consciousness and understanding that the foundational technologies for this stuff were really developed right here at the University of Toronto and at the University of Montreal and at the University of Alberta, Edmonton. The next competency that we have, though, is what's called human-centric computing or applied computing. And Canada is actually number 1 in the world. So this is the computer science discipline of using techniques from anthropology, psychology, sociology, and deeply understanding problems and people and their needs, and then inventing technologies that solve those problems and meet people's needs. When we were first starting up, we thought, well, maybe we'll just be a venture fund and we'll start funding things that match our thesis. But we looked around and saw there just aren't companies that understand this yet, right? We're looking to create Instagram way back in 2007. Now, if you think back to 2007, right, iPhone first comes out. The first iPhone had a camera, but not a very good one, right? Technologically, there's no reason that Instagram couldn't have existed in 2007, right? Like it's a website where you upload pictures and you can browse them. But fundamentally, in terms of the user problem that you're solving, the opportunity, there's no reason to create Instagram until you have everyone walking around with a smartphone in their pocket, right? And so, the application emerges from people using the platform. What we can do here in Canada, because of our incredible lead in applied computing, we can just look at our back catalog of projects for the last 10 years. So yes, we de-risk, but AXL fundamentally is about catapulting into the future and along the way passing Silicon Valley as they're using their 1,000 monkeys typing 1,000 typewriters approach.
It's funny you say that. I have a Wikipedia link to that in my Instagram profile. And it's been there for 12 years or whatever. With that expertise that you mentioned in Canada about human-computer interface, would that extend to physical AI as well, like robotics? Or are we talking two-dimensional screens mostly?
It fundamentally is about understanding people and their needs and then inventing technologies. So out of my lab at U of P, we've done everything from inventing new printed circuit board manufacturing methods right through to, creating new robotics technologies. So don't think of human-computer interaction as like an expertise in interfaces. What it really is an expertise in deeply understanding people and their needs and having cutting-edge understanding of all the technologies as it exists today and being able to invent new things to solve those needs. And you can apply that expertise absolutely to physical computing.
Great. Well, the next time we meet in person, I'm going to have to tap you up. I volunteer at a friend's farm. As it turns out, pruning apple trees is really challenging. Like it's a real skill. Like there's these mystic people out there that have these skills at maximizing yield from fruit trees through their shears, the sheer power of their shears. And they've asked me, hey, can you use AI to help us prune the trees ourselves? I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll talk to Daniel about that next time I'm in Toronto. So I was looking through your website and I know a bit more about what you do at AXL, but it seems my background it is in demand generation, product marketing. And I noticed that a lot of the message on your site speaks to me about product market fit. And it seems like you're almost obsessive about product market fit.
Yeah, I think that's the manifestation of the fact that at our core, we're a bunch of scientists who have partnered with some very successful business people to create AXL. And so we believe always in forming hypotheses and testing them and doing those experiments as cheaply and quickly as possible. So, we get very strong signal from the fact that when we have our corporate partnerships, we reinvest more than $100,000 of money and time into deeply investigating and finding opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise know could be something that might be able to be solved by technology, by AI. So that's a very strong, signal in terms of an opportunity, right? What is the problem to solve? In terms of fit, any given moment, we are asking ourselves, what is the minimum viable object? We haven't got the right term for it yet. That was to go and start selling. So in some instances, it's a landing page and a 40-second recording of someone talking about it and saying, okay, would you place an order? Would you give us $10 for this? And, it's about being efficient and quick in making our determinations.
It just strikes me that, a lot of your colleagues at AXL have an academic background, and it's almost like you would think innovation is often based on science, but it feels like you're bringing science to innovation, almost a scientific method to innovation.
I based a lot of my thinking on Thomas Edison, right? I mean, he created a great reputation of being this great mind who invented things. What he did incredibly well was create a process for inventing things, right? He didn't invent the light bulb. He discovered the filament that wouldn't die out too quickly, but they did it by testing 10,000 different materials. Right. So it's all about building good process and doing it in a way that allows you to very, very quickly test hypotheses.
So proof is always in the pudding in terms of process. And so do you have any success stories you could share briefly with our listeners? Like what's come out of the studio that you're proud of and can tell a bit more about?
Yeah, the first partner that came through was Denton, the world's largest law firm. And everything we heard back from them was process automation, right? But it's all about what is something that exists today that I can use AI to replace. And there's sort of two problems with that. The first is it thinks about AI backwards. It thinks about AI as an opportunity to cut costs, which is an okay place to start, I guess, conceptually, but it dramatically underplays the opportunity that AI really creates. And the second problem, of course, is when you're talking about automating processes that exist today, is you're talking about putting a lot of people out of work. And one of our core values is that we believe the future is human-centric. So we don't create companies that replace human beings. We create companies that empower and enable human beings. That was just the first bit of the conversation. Then we spent months doing workshops, interviews, surveys. We attended their North American AI Summit with, I think, 600 of their clients from all over North America and beyond, and heard not just, what are the things that a lawyer might need to do their job better, but more, what are the problems that their clients have that we might be able to solve with technology? So as a quick example, one of the things we heard over and over and over again at that AI Summit is everyone's terrified of GDPR, right, European privacy laws. And all the conversation at a lawyer summit was about how do I limit liability? How do I, not have to pay fines, right? It's all about how do I put policies in place to protect me? But as an AI person, I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, geez, fundamentally, you're worried about this problem because your database is stupid. It will just record anything and it could leak anything. So could we replace the data layer in the database with a technology that enforces the actual privacy policies themselves? So now you don't have to worry about telling someone in a call center not to record something. If they try to record something that violates the policy, it just won't get recorded. So Denton's recognizes that 5 years from now, it's unlikely that we will charge by the hour for their lawyer's time. So the startups we create with our partners are not just startups that our partners themselves will be customers of. We look at it as creating the startup that 5 years from now will buy the partner because they will have taken over the marketplace and transformed the business model. So that's one quick example. And I also mentioned one of our companies, and it's called LearnAid, and it's been deployed at the University of Toronto, and it's been helping thousands of students to do their assignments better. And basically it takes away the fear factor that all the students have around using AI. They're terrified that they're going to get accused of plagiarism or it's just going to do their homework for them. They won't really learn. They're going to get in trouble, right? And then at the same time, the instructors get really frustrated because one, they're not really sure the students are learning anything. But two, if someone just goes and asks an AI, to teach them something, it might teach it in a different way or teach a related but the wrong concept and not everyone's on the same page, right? So how do you keep the instructor at the center? So LearnAid looks at this and says, let's create an AI that fundamentally is intended to help students to learn better and is crafted by the professor, by the course instructor. So this has turned out to be quite popular, and thousands of students are using it across multiple courses and it's expanding to other universities.
Yeah, that's incredible. I've always felt that one of the best sort of lenses through which to look at artificial intelligence technology and its application is in industries and professions where there'll never be enough resource. It's like and those tend to skew towards public services, but not always. But you think healthcare and education, there'll never be enough teachers. Like I've got friends in education, they're dealing with classrooms of 30 plus kids, multicultural classrooms, different languages, on and on and on it goes. In fact, on the Ask AI website, one of the biggest landing pages we have is about a guide to AI in education, which is a resource page for teachers and educators and administrators to check out. And it's ranked pretty well over the years on search. But yeah, that level of engagement just speaks to the fact that there's a real need out there. And I think an intuitive recognition that this is a place where a helping hand will go an awfully long way to helping the outcome we want. And I always remind people, education as we know it, we might treat it with kid gloves, but it's only like, I don't know, 150 years old. Before then, you're lucky to get off the farm. And maybe you were home taught to one of your parents. But, this is not like something that we've been fine tuning since the Middle Ages. Maybe universities are, but not sort of the public school system.
If you don't mind, Chris, I'll just give a quick example of, I think this is also a great demonstration of why Canada can leap forward, right? So with
Yeah.
the first version of education with AI, what we hear is, how do we add AI? Well, let's replace the teacher, right? Like let's have customized lessons for the students. Let's have more teachers, and that could be great. And we've described how it could help. But the other thing is, it gives us a chance to reinvent education. So if you look at pedagogical research and pedagogical theory, it's well understood what are the best ways to learn things, right? And we've heard, right? You'll remember 20% of what I say or 30% of what I do, right? That all comes from well understood research. And it turns out that there is the best possible way to learn things that no one has ever been able to build at scale because it doesn't scale easily. And that the best way to learn something is to teach someone else. And this is why you had a reading buddy when you were a kid, right? Surprise, that wasn't for them, it was for you, right? So what we can now do with AI is not just, enable scale, but we can fundamentally change the educational experience, right? So if I want to teach Johnny how to do something, the best way to do it is a human instructor still gives the lesson, but then Johnny's job isn't just to go and apply it. Johnny's job is then to go and teach an AI, right? His AI Tamagotchi, the concept. And now we see Johnny's learning is going up dramatically. And we're seeing this as a great effect. So that's a good example of how Canada can leap ahead by understanding the fundamentals of human psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I love this area. I recently did a field note, my short video series with the founder of Coral Talk, which is a Toronto Waterloo-based AI education startup. And one of the things they do is kinetic signals of learning comprehension. I don't know too much about that, but I'm assuming that certain hand gestures and facial gestures are good signals for comprehension, and things like that. I thought that was pretty interesting on their part. Great. So I had a question here about what does a great AI pitch sound like, but learning more about how AXL Studio works, it's not quite like that. You're not asking people to come in and tell you their grand idea, but how do people get engaged with you or Axel?
Yeah. So my full-time job as CEO is to go out and recruit our future founders. So that's what I'm doing every day, pounding the pavement, taking copy dates, going and giving talks. Seth North was an example of that where you and I met. We have our Innovator in Residence program, which is an iteration on the classic Entrepreneur in Residence. And so there's an application right on our website. People can fill out the form and come meet with us and talk about their experience and start the conversation that way. Fundamentally, at its most basic level, what Axel is creating a network. So we're not just looking for founders, we're looking for mentors and advisors and people with expertise. And so, I'm excited to connect with any of them and, hit me up on LinkedIn, but then also the Innovator in Residence. Yeah. We've got a great program designed. We can, make sure you're not starving and can actually start diving into creating your next startup.
Be careful what you ask for. I'm going to be putting these links in the show notes for sure. So that's amazing. Yeah, no, I really appreciated your proactivity. I think I said this to you before when we were both at SAS North. I was a bit exhausted. I'd just shaken 50 hands and I was sort of off to the side, taking a breather. And you made a motion to come over and introduce yourself. I thought that was really amazing. So I really appreciated that because it's turned out to yield some great conversations, including this one. So just wrapping up, when we recorded our field note, their little 3-minute short video, you mentioned this idea of the infinite canvas. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what this means. Just break down this concept a little bit and why you find it so interesting and inspirational.
So the infinite canvas is fundamentally an interaction metaphor, right? Like a basic manifestation of the way that we're going to present digital information to the person. And you think about it, from the very beginning, representations of information have provided incredible power, and the representations we choose enable different operations. So for example, think about Roman numerals, right? The ability to do long division or addition with Roman numerals is so much harder than with Arabic numerals, where the position in line represents the exponent, the power of 10, right? Where you can just line up the two numbers on top of each other and add across the columns. You can't do that with Roman numerals, right? So just doing basic math is a lot harder with Roman numerals than it is with Arabic numerals. So project that forward now to the more advanced tools that we use. The desktop interface first emerges in the early 1980s, building on Engelbart's work, Alan Kay and others at Park and then at Apple, starting to realize the power of what they called the desktop. As a quick aside, by the way, just a little history lesson for your listeners, it was called the desktop not because it's a computer that sits on your desk. It's called a desktop because, like papers on a desk, the windows were allowed to overlap each other. So the next time someone says, is that a desktop or a laptop? You can say both, because all modern laptops are desktop computers. But moving along. So what we're talking about with AI is, what is that really rich representation that we are going to have that's going to enable us to have really powerful use of tools with AI? And to me, the chat interfaces are the Roman numerals for AI, right? It is a pseudo-human anthropomorphization of this intelligence that really limits its bandwidth for communication and also doesn't take advantage of any of the basic ways that humans communicate with each other, right? Even while I'm talking to you right now, I'm gesturing with my hands and that has meaning. If we wanted to work collaboratively on a project, then we might put ourselves in a room with a whiteboard. And then the whiteboard isn't just a way for us to write down information. The actual physical layout of information on the board starts to have meaning, right? I'm sure you could picture a conversation you've had with someone at the whiteboard where you're explaining a concept and you draw a picture, and anyone walking by wouldn't understand what that picture meant. But because it has associated with it all that information from your conversation, you just gesture at it and say, oh, remember that idea, right? And sort of loads everything into RAM that to continue the conversation. So now, with those basic principles in place, what is this infinite canvas thing that I was talking about? So the infinite canvas as a metaphor is actually very old. It predates the desktop metaphor. It comes from the early 1960s at Lincoln Labs, associated with MIT. A guy named Ivan Sutherland puts out an interface that uses a pen and literally an effectively infinite space in 2 dimensions that you can zoom in and zoom out and draw and put information anywhere you want. Sort of like an infinitely wide piece of paper, an infinitely large whiteboard. And this is the basis for a lot of applications we use today. This is how, if you're doing 3D modeling, for example, or if you're using OneNote from Microsoft, I'm sure many of the other note-taking softwares do this, where the actual spatial layout of information starts to be meaningful to the representation. So what I'm really excited about with AI, and the reason I think the infinite canvas is so powerful, is the chat interface is just an excruciating way to have a deep collaboration with someone, right? When I'm using Slack to chat with a team member, that's great for quick questions, quick conversations, sharing ideas. But as soon as the thread has more than 3 or 4 participants and lasts more than 5 or 10 messages, it's just completely unusable as a collaboration tool, right? The fact that we're sort of limiting our collaboration with this incredible intelligence that in many, many ways is, a tiny fraction of our intelligence, and in many, many ways is a huge multiplier in our intelligence. And that we're using this sort of chat interface to do it is like, talking with paper cups with the string between them to try to talk to someone, right? You're just losing all this information. You're making it this slow and painful thing to do. So picture an infinite canvas, the equivalent of a whiteboard. Imagine that you're going to collaborate with something with an AI. Let's say you're going to collaborate to create a company and to operate that company. Imagine that you could, in partnership with the AI, start to lay out like the departments of your company and using something like an org chart, right? And then that's one level of information. And then as you zoom into each of the levels of the org chart, each of the nodes in that chart represents an agent that you can give instructions to and collaborate with. And now you can start to set up information flows between them. And then over time, the company that you're vibe coding in collaboration with your AI, this is the tool that you use to create it, but then it also becomes the dashboard that you're going to use to operate your company, right? And I think the really powerful interfaces that await us are those technologies that enable you to have that kind of a rich, ongoing communication that really makes use of more of human spatial memory and human sense. And along those lines, we at AXL, most of our companies, as I've described, are ones where we are solving very specific business problems rather than generalized tools. But one of our companies that we are going to be launching in the next few months is our alternative client for large language models. And so it's going to embody a whole bunch of the much more advanced interface ideas and concepts that we've been working on for years here at the University of Toronto. And we're really excited to be sharing that with the world in the coming months.
That's a great answer and really fills a lot of the blanks I had about infinite canvas. I think it's one of those concepts that more and more people should look into. You're absolutely right. We're at such the early days of the experience of artificial intelligence and how humans engage with it. It's great to know there's people out there like you with such a deep experience in not only the technology, but user experience that are working on solving this problem and pushing the boundaries. So Daniel Wigdor, CEO of AXL Studios, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for tuning in to Ask AI, your guide to spotting opportunities and navigating challenges in the era of artificial intelligence. Since 2017, our independent nonprofit has brought together experts, volunteers, and innovators to share balanced insights on AI and the transformation of work. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking AI. You can access more free resources and subscribe to our newsletter at askai.org. That's askai.org.